Hearthfire. How is everyone in the Northern Hemisphere doing this Samhain? I hope everyone is planning to celebrate and have a good time. I know I do. Later today is my protogo's ritual and potluck, and I just can't wait. I also want to say hi to my listeners in the Southern Hemisphere, the few but mighty. I hope you have a great time at your Beltane celebrations. Right now, you can find our podcast on Stitcher, iTunes, Podbean, and on Patreon, and we're also starting to show up on YouTube and also Google Play. I would appreciate any and all reviews, especially in iTunes, though I have just found out that I can't exactly find out any analytics on iTunes because of the way that I'm importing things, but still I would appreciate the reviews. I also want to mention that I have fixed the issue that rated the podcast explicit on iTunes specifically. I had to change a setting I didn't realize was even there. On Patreon, I want to let you know that I have 2 levels or tiers for patronage if you want to help support the podcast. Each has its own rewards and privileges. The first is called the Bread Butter tier. $1 per month gets you access to all the podcasts, including a mini one which is centered around the Dedicant Path. The next level up is a wine and cheese level, the $5 tier that gives you an option of being featured on the podcast on top of access to all the episodes. Please go to Patreon and check it out and help support the podcast. All websites will be listed with links in the show notes as per usual. Now, on to the rest of the podcast. Last time we had Chris Godwin give us a brief description of Michaelmas and how it was celebrated by ancient peoples and how it's still celebrated even today. This time around we are going to be discussing the history of the Irish Celtic Samhain. Samhain is a Gaelic festival marking the end of the harvest season and the beginning of winter, or the darker half of the year. Traditionally, it is celebrated from the 31st of October, or the end of October, to the 1st of November, as the Celtic day began and ended at sunset rather than sunrise. This is about halfway between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice, at least in the Northern Hemisphere. It is one of the 4 Gaelic seasonal festivals, along with Imbolc, Beltane, and Lunasa. Historically, it was widely observed throughout Ireland, Scotland, and the Isle of Man. Similar festivals are held at the same time of year in other Celtic lands. For example, and I do apologize, I'm going to be butchering all these names, the Brythonic Caelan Gaeaf in Wales, or the Caelan Gae in Cornwall, and the Caelan Gund in Brittany. And once again, I do apologize for butchering those. Samhain is believed to have been Celtic pagan in origin, and there is evidence that it has been an important date since ancient times. The Mound of the Hostiles, a Neolithic passage tomb on the hill of Tara, is aligned with the Samhain sunrise. Samhain is mentioned in some of the earliest of Irish literature, and many important events in Irish mythology happen or begin at this time of year. It was the time when cattle were brought back down from the summer pastures and when livestock were slaughtered for the winter. As at Beltane, special bonfires were lit. And usually these bonfires had in them special herbs and special spices and things like that actually kept the cattle healthy, or removed fleas from the cattle and prevented disease, because they were brought in through these bonfires, and the herbs and things that were in the bonfires helped keep the cattle healthy. These were deemed to have protective and cleansing powers, and there were rituals involving them. Like Beltane, Samhain was seen as a liminal time when the boundary between this world and the other world could easily be crossed. This meant the Aoshi, the Fae, could more easily come into our world as well. At Samhain, it was believed the Aoshi needed to be propagated or appeased to ensure that the people and their livestock survived the winter. Offerings of food and drink were left outside for them. The souls of the dead were also thought to revisit their homes seeking hospitality. Feasts were had at which souls of dead kin were beckoned to attend and places set at the table for them. Mumming or guising were part of the festival and involved people going door to door in costume or in disguise, often reciting verses in exchange for food or hospitality. The costumes may have been a way of imitating and disguising oneself from the Aoshi. Divination rituals and games were also a big part of festivals and often involved nuts and apples, which were also harvested around this time of year in some areas. In the late 19th century, Sir John Rhys and Sir James Fraser suggested that it was the Celtic New Year, and this view has been repeated in some other scholars. And this view has been repeated by some other scholars. In the 9th century AD, or somewhere around there, Western Christianity shifted the date of All Saints' Day to the 1st of November, while the 2nd of November later became All Souls' Day. Over time, Samhain and All Saints' Day, All Souls' Day merged to create the modern Halloween. Historians have used the name Samhain to refer to Gaelic Halloween customs up until the 19th century. Since the later 20th century, Celtic neo-pagans, Wiccans, have observed Samhain, or something based on it, as a religious holiday. Neo-pagans in the southern hemisphere often celebrate Samhain at the other end of the year, around the 1st of May. Alright, now next up we have the main part of the podcast, the submissions portion. And to begin that, we have a piece of music submitted by Dave Gibson, who wrote this piece as a tribute to his recently passed father. And it really is a very beautiful tribute, and I thought it appropriate for this time of year. I hope you enjoy.
Wish you well on your outward journey. Wanna take a moment to remember times gone by, so many precious gifts of love, such timeless moments, burning embers. I can't repay the many debts I owe you. No, I can't give back such selfless giving, for there is no token gesture worth expressing that can quite explain the truth I'm living. Fare thee well on, take it easy. Slip into the rainbows of you, my hand. Fare thee well, don't take it easy. Kiss the other shore where there is no more pain to bring you down. You're free now. Saw you gazing one early morning at your open hand, lost in wonder. looked eternity quite in the face. I saw a blind man's veil torn asunder, and I learned a truth that morning life is youth, and no amount of dying ever ends it. So he's to given and he's to living, given every chance love tended. Fare thee well and take it easy, slip into the rainbows of human hand. Fare thee well and take it easy, 'cause see us show where there is no more pain to bring you down. You're free now. Living fields, seeds of truth are sown. I can see the way you change my world now. Summer's flown, but around the dawn, just a corner line on the street now. I won't forget the many words you gave me, won't forget the love carved inside me. Born a star in an endless harbor, may your light shine brightly and set me free. Fare thee well and take it easy, slip into the rainbows of human hand. Fare thee well and take it easy, 'cause see us show where there is no more pain to bring you down. You're free now. 'Cause see us show where there is no more pain to bring you down. You're free now.
And I just want to see how well it actually records, and I think it got that, Vern.
Well, you can edit it out.
Yes, it's also on a separate track, so I think we're good. All right, well, thank you, Dave, for that lovely tribute. Now, on to the rest of the submissions, where we find out what the druids are up to and how they honor the kindred during this time of year. This time around, we didn't get many submissions, but we did receive many comments on our Facebook groups in response to when I asked the question, what is your favorite part of this time of year? I also have a special guest here with me to help me read some of them with me. Vernon, why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners?
Hi, I'm Vernon, your special guest host for this part of Ash's podcast. I'm going to help out reading some of the responses to the question. What is your favorite part of this time of year of Samhain?
I'm really glad you were willing to come on today. How long have you been on ADF?
I have only been an official ADF member for about 6 months, but I've been coming to local Proto Grove events for about a year and a half now.
Okay, that sounds about right. So to get started, let's briefly answer the question ourselves. So what is your favorite part of this time of year, Vernon?
You didn't see I was supposed to answer questions. Really, this is my favorite time of year in all particular fashions. I love the weather, I love the darkness, I love the mood, as it allows me to be the most of myself. I love scaring people. Not real scares, but theatrical.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it sounds like you just love this time of year, just in general.
Samhain is pretty much, it is my once a year day.
All right, well, my favorite would have to be the weather. The leaves beginning to fall and the temperature becoming cooler. I like getting out my sweaters and smelling the brisk air. It reminds me of when my family would spend time up in the mountains where snow is a possibility. The smells of my mother's apple and pumpkin pies would fill the air. My mouth kind of waters just thinking about it, and my eyes do tear up a bit. I do miss my mother, especially during this time of year.
So Dave Gibson wrote, "The great beauty of this season of death, the Morrigan washing the blooded warrior's clothes and making love to the Dagda."
Okay, and Jesse Munn wrote in, "The night's just starting to be cool enough to remind you that all warm things end and begin again. Wanting to wear more woolen cuddles. Thinking of how I lived and want to live in the new year."
Don Hyatt says, "The energy shift from summer to fall. I enjoy the cooler days, the change in leaves, the winding down of energy to a restful state. I can feel the connection beyond to the veil, and connecting to the ancestors and nature spirit seems more strong at this time."
And I'm going to butcher this name, but it's Yagzeli Griffin. I do apologize if I butchered it, but they wrote in, "Since the full moon, I have noticed the veils opening more each day. Lots of spirits coming to visit. I've had to do battle with demonish creatures more than twice, which isn't uncommon for me, but the frequency it now is. Animals inside and out have increased their activity." And we kind of continued our conversation because I found it very interesting, especially the demonish battles. Not to make light of it, but I was asking, does this happen every year, or is this a different thing this time of year? And I was asking for a little bit more detail. And they responded with, "It happens every couple of years, so 2 in 1 week is a bit much. I view it as a wake-up call to see other manifestations of similar natures. I normally have to keep up psychic protections at a high level, as I had a barrage of attacks in the early 90s. All right, so thank you so much for writing in, and I hope to hear more from everyone in the future. And thank you, Vernon, for popping in and helping me read those wonderful submissions.
Thank you for having me. I'll be happy to help anytime.
Next up is our book review. This time we are going to be reviewing Diana Paxton's Transportation. I want to start out saying that this book was very much a surprise. I found it at a used bookstore for about $9.99 a few years back and had no idea who Diana Paxton was at the time I picked it up. I picked it up because it had a cool cover and I liked the play of words in the title. Reading through it, I found it very readable, but in depth enough that I could keep going back to learn more. It's a good-sized book at 230 pages, not including the appendices and the bibliography, but manageable with lots of practical information about trance work, which is something I've always been interested in. It has examples galore for both the Nordic practitioner and those of us who just want something we can use without getting into what culture to pick from. The bibliography is substantial, and I can't see any questionable sources listed that pop out. So the book is very practical and informative, but it also has a sense of humor to balance out the information, keeping it from becoming very dry. I will definitely be keeping this on my bookshelf for many years to come. Keep an eye out for a copy at any local bookstores, both used and new, but also look for it on Amazon and on other online booksellers. Links to a few will be in the show notes. Next up, we have the recipe/cooking portion of the show, and this time you're in for a real treat. The days are getting shorter and the nights colder, and for my family, a hot bowl of beef stew was always a yummy tradition during this time of year. So what we've got today is a recipe for a really, really nice, simple beef stew. Okay, so here's the list of the ingredients that you're going to need for making this stew. There's going to be flour, ground pepper, stewing meat, vegetable oil, red wine vinegar, red wine. Pick a good wine that you actually like drinking. Otherwise, you will not like eating it. You've got either beef broth, either homemade or low sodium canned, or your favorite kind that you get from the store. Bay leaves, onions, carrots, potatoes, and salt. Like I said, very simple recipe, not that many ingredients, and they're not particularly hard to find ingredients either. Okay, so here's the recipe. The preparation is really simple, basically three steps that you do a few things for each. First off, you combine the flour and pepper in a bowl. Add the beef, which has been cut into 1-inch chunks, and toss to coat well. Heat 3 teaspoons of oil in a large pot. Add the beef, a few pieces at a time. Don't overcrowd. Basically what you're going to be doing is you're browning the meat, so you want all the meat to basically have even coverage. So you don't want it to be too crowded. You can do this in several batches, or if you got a really big pot, like I remember my mother having, you can do them all at once, but make sure it's even coverage and you are browning them evenly. Cook turning the pieces until beef is browned on all sides, about 5 minutes per batch if you're doing it in batches. Add more oil as needed between batches. Alright, now remove the beef from the pot and add the vinegar and wine. Cook over a medium-high heat, scraping the pan with a wooden spoon to loosen any brown bits. Add the beef again, the beef broth, and the bay leaves, two bay leaves. Bring to a boil and then reduce to a low simmer. You're going to be covering and cooking this, skimming the broth from time to time if you'd like, until the beef is tender, or about 1 to 2 hours. Add the onions and carrots and simmer, covered for about 10 minutes. Add the potatoes and simmer until vegetables are tender, or about 30 minutes more. Add broth or water if the stew becomes dry. Season with salt and pepper to taste, and ladle among 4 bowls and enjoy. Very simple recipe, very rustic, and just a very good recipe to have during this time of year. I hope you enjoy. And the link to the actual recipe, which was featured in the New York Times website, on the New York Times website, will be in the show notes as well, so you can get a look at that, so you can actually see the recipe. Okay, well, next up we have our calendar with events that ADF has a presence at, or that it runs itself. Okay, so these next couple months, there's not a lot going on, as a lot of people are having a lot of celebrations during October, November, and December. Winter solstice is going on. A lot of people are going to be busy. So there's actually not a lot of events that are going on right now, and for practical reasons. So the next one that actually shows up is a pan-pagan convention called PantheaCon, which happens every year in San Jose. This year it's going to be February 17th through the 21st, and it's going to be at the Doubletree Hotel in San Jose, California. And if you want more information to buy tickets, see what's going on, and find out what the schedule's like, you can go to pantheacon.com. And once again, links will be listed in the show notes, just in case you missed this. Okay, and the next one that comes up is going to be in March, which is going to be the PaganiCon convention. And this is once again another pan-pagan convention. And it's going to be happening this next year March 17th through 19th. And it's going to be in St. Louis Park, Minnesota at the Doubletree Park Place. And if you want more information, the website for that is going to be paganicon.org. And once again, it's going to be in the show notes. Okay? And the last event we have for you this time around is a convention called GostiCon. And this is a pan-pagan festival as well. And it's going to be from the March 23rd to March 26th. So 3 to 4 days. And it's going to be at the Best Western Albany Airport Inn in Albany, New York. And if you want more information, their website is ghosty-con.org. Oh. Ghosty.
Yeah, I'm just saying if you're saying it, you should spell it out for them since
It's going to be in the show notes.
Okay.
The link is going to be there. I'm editing this. All right. All right.
Okay, that shot. Somewhere.
Be quiet, Vernon. You're no longer a co-host. Be quiet. All right, wrapping up, I would like to first thank all of you for your submissions, especially Dave Gibson for his lovely tribute to his father. I would also especially like to thank Bonnie Laundrie, who you heard in the intro with Fire Burn Bright. We're getting ready to put the next podcast together here at Kindling the Hearthfire, and if you have any ideas, celebrations, poems, songs, invocations, or anything else that you would like to hear included in the podcast, please send them to kindlingthehearthfire@gmail.com. I also would love to see pictures of your celebrations. Either post them to the Facebook groups or on Instagram with the hashtag KTH for Kindling the Hearthfire. Next time, we are going to be discussing the winter solstice. Deadline for submissions for the next podcast is December 8th. And tune in Saturday, December 16th for another episode of Kindling the Hearthfire. You can find our podcast on Stitcher, iTunes, Podbean, Google Play, YouTube, and on Patreon. We are also on Facebook. Be well, and may you continue to pray with a good fire.